Germany calling, Germany calling, Germany calling.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Diary, in which we look at the annals of true crime to find events that happened on this week in history. I'm your host, Mark DeCano, and with me are my friends, Jed Lester.
All right.
And Rue Turner.
Hello.
So the date we're looking at this week is the 17th of September, and on this day in 1945 the trial began of William Joyce. Joyce had been captured that May by British forces in Flensburg, the final capital of Nazi Germany after the fall of Berlin. Known in the UK as Lord Haw-Haw, he'd broadcast propaganda to Britain on behalf of the Third Reich and now faced trial for high treason.
Did he? Why? I don't know anything about this really, other than the name Lord Haw-Haw, because people have generally heard of him, but don't necessarily know, can explain it. But I'm just going to ask, you two can talk and I'll just ask stupid questions. All right.
Is it worth looking at what high treason actually is?
It's interesting because on the books at the time there was also the crime of treachery, which is not the same thing as treason.
Is treason different to high treason?
Technically,
It's
yeah.
higher.
It's higher.
Yeah.
It's a lot higher.
It's better. Yeah. Okay.
Obviously, you have perspective on it.
There was just one part of high treason which I found quite amusing, which was part of the definition of high treason was to have sex with the regent's eldest unmarried daughter.
Yeah. Well, we've all done that, so...
You say anything about that and I'll do you for treason.
What?
Perhaps polluting the royal line, but I don't know. But
yeah.
Oh, okay. Right. It's classed as a treasonable...
Yeah.
But if she was married,
treasonistic.
but not necessarily married to you, it wouldn't be considered
That
high
would be
treason.
fine, yeah.
So, in this case, what is high treason?
It is a breach of allegiance to the crown in terms of acting directly against it.
Which it always, treason obviously always was, but this was obviously mega big.
Yeah, so as I
Treason.
said, yeah, mega big treason. It's massive treason.
Yeah.
But this was a crime that only existed during the Second World War, wasn't it? Sort of, kind of stopped at the end of the Second World War. And
Treason?
then repealed in 1968. No,
High treason.
Yeah, high treason.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Right.
And I mentioned treachery, and that was only during wartime as well.
Which is different.
Which is different.
Is it lower than
The-
treason?
Yeah, I mean, the main difference is that if you're found guilty of treason, you hang. If you're found
At the
guilty
time?
at the time, if you're found guilty of treachery, that can be commuted. So it
It
doesn't have to, you don't have to hang.
would
if
have
it's
been loads
treachery.
of treason at that time.
Yeah.
There would have been loads of treachery, wouldn't there?
Yeah, well, so there's a lot of ways of being treasonous.
Does high treason still exist?
Well, no, I mean,
It
no,
does,
I think
but
so.
you don't. Oh right. Okay,
No,
sorry.
despite what it will say below the line, as they say in
I mean, it will
chat
just be
rooms
called
and-
something else.
yeah,
won't it?
yeah. Well, there's still treason is still a crime.
Yeah.
High treason, there isn't. It would all come under the same heading of treason. But of course, the death penalty was abolished decades ago. So
A tall man.
We don't do that sort of thing in civilized society.
good Lord, no.
Don't cut into my joke. A tall man kept on bumping his head on the top of a door frame. And it was because of a height reason. A height reason. William Joyce.
So
He sounds English.
here's the thing. He
Was
was
he
born in
English?
America.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Oh, he could sound American. Yeah. All right.
he was born in America. He was raised in Ireland. Father was Catholic. Mother was a Protestant Unionist, which would have been very interesting.
Yeah.
When he was in his youth, he worked for British intelligence during the Irish War for Independence. So he was a schoolboy at the
Really?
time. Yeah.
I had a paper round.
Yeah, well, exactly.
He probably had a paper round, but he was just passing different
just-
bits of paper
Oh,
around.
yeah,
to you.
sorry. Yeah.
exactly. The reason he came to England was he was moved there by his British handlers in order to escape being killed by the IRA.
Didn't someone go to kill him
Yes.
on his way home from school.
Yeah. In fact,
Yet
generally,
they'd moved to another house round the corner.
They'd
a few
moved
days
house.
before.
yeah. I mean, this is a story in and of itself. He was walking home from school, and the member of the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, was sent to assassinate him.
Wow.
And it wasn't normally
Was
their
that
policy.
a schoolboy?
A schoolboy, yeah.
Blimey.
The IRA didn't have a policy usually of killing minors, but they made an exception.
Sure,
in
yeah.
this case.
They tried to.
And yeah, and the reason that the assassination attempt failed, as you said, was
moved.
they'd moved house around the corner.
Wow.
Completely threw the plan awry.
I'm sure they could have
Could have planned better.
actually
yes.
asked a couple of people and
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
So he was a minor. So his military handlers, they moved him to England, and he went to school in Wimbledon,
Right.
which is in South London. And the family followed a couple of years later. So they all moved to England. So he wasn't. He was born in America, raised in Ireland. So he was schoolboy age when they moved to.
And the family was originally from Ireland, wasn't it?
The family was originally from Ireland, Galway, I think.
Right.
I don't even know who he looks like.
Well, he had a very distinctive scar. So he
Yeah.
had a scar on his right side of his face that ran from behind his ear all the way down his face to his mouth. Very distinctive, and he got that in 1924 because he was engaged in politics at the time, supporting a conservative politician, and he was attacked by communists. This was a time in the 20s when politics was getting quite violent, even in Britain, but mostly in Europe.
Yep.
But he got the scar apparently by communists. He later said that it was a Jew that did it, but his wife apparently said that it was a woman, who wasn't Jewish. But, who knows?
Dunno.
But he was anti-Semitic from the outset, so
That was the
any opportunity to say a Jew done it.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was just a random.
So, yeah, sort of self-fulfilling, really. If somebody hated him, they must have been a Jew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Okay, fine. So the building blocks are being put in place to his
Yes.
persuasion.
Absolutely.
Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's grown up with violence, obviously in Ireland,
Yeah.
and he's got the family being hated from both sides because he's got a Catholic
Yeah.
father and a
But he
Protestant
was
mother.
for.
All right.
He was when he was a schoolboy, he was for the British government. I mean,
Yeah,
I
it was,
didn't
his
necessarily
mother
agree
was
with it, but
unionist. I'm not sure if his father was Catholic, but he wasn't massively Republican because he married a unionist. But his mother was very unionist,
Right.
which is loyal to Britain.
I bet that wedding reception was
That would have been a party.
fiery.
I thought I saw that he was anti-Irish unionist.
Right, yeah. Republican.
Yeah.
Anti-Republican. Yeah. Well, she was a unionist, passionately.
Okay.
So and the boy, obviously, the young boy, William, he operated from that standpoint. So he supported the British. But he's then gone more and more right-wing. He's gone from establishment to more conservative until in 1932 he finally joins the British Union of Fascists
Right.
with Oswald Mosley.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
And Mosley and others said that he was really good at giving speeches.
So he was mates with Mosley.
Mates of Mosley, but even then, as a member of the fascists, he drifts further and further right, if that's even possible.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
In 1934, so he's joined the fascists in 32. 2 years later, he's made their director of propaganda.
Well,
So
They liked
he's
him.
writing fascist propaganda
Yeah.
for the Union of Fascists.
I see what you mean, yeah.
And around that time, he also was instrumental in changing the party name to the British Union of Fascists and National Socialists. I don't know if that rings a bell with anyone. So basically, he's very pro-German.
So the Battle of Cable Street is a very famous London, what would you call it, riot in the 30s to do with the British Union of Fascists. So Cable Street is part of the London's East End, and British Union of Fascists tried to kind of storm it.
Well, it was a march. Yeah. So the British Union of Fascists, and yes, it would have been Mosley and most likely Joyce. They were on a march. They were demonstrating basically against everyone who lived in the area they were
Exactly,
marching in.
yeah.
So they're marching it through Whitechapel in the East End,
Yeah.
which is a big Jewish community, and they would have all been there, and they were marching in anti-socialist, anti-communist, and basically anti-Jewish, effectively. And there was the police were there trying to protect the march, and then obviously everyone in the community wanted to beat
Basically, they fought back,
It was a mass ruck,
and
yeah.
they won. Basically, they pushed them back. But in that particular instance, let's face it, not in history, they didn't. But but yes, it was a massive.
I mean, it was massive. There were 3,000 fascists marching, and in opposition there were 20,000 anti-fascists,
Right.
approximately.
Altogether, 84 rioters are taken into custody, while the police firmly prevent the battle from taking an uglier turn. 80 injured are taken to hospital. Hundreds more receive first aid on the spot.
So yeah, it was a major bundle, and the people against the fascist march heavily outnumbered them.
That's quite normal.
Well, I mean that's normal, yeah.
I mean, you see that sort of in recent years in London when you see kind of right-wing marches by the UKIP and the likes.
Yeah,
there's
there's not
usually
many.
half a dozen of them, and then
Yeah.
500 other people calmly standing at the side, going,
Yeah.
down with this sort of thing.
Well, exactly, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to put it in perspective at the time because this is at a time 1936. This is the Nazis have been in power for 3 years in Germany. So when people the British Union of fascists or another very similar paramilitary organisation based on them, and they're marching, you'd think, well, they might have at least some political standpoint. But unfortunately for them, I should say, they didn't have nearly the sway, and Britain didn't have at the time the political unrest that was on the continent. So basically, everyone was just against it. You know, the political history of Britain is usually about being quite sarcastic and taking the mickey out of authoritarian figures.
So at that time, had he become a publicity and marketing?
Well, he was propagandist for the fascist party.
So my point
The
is,
UF.
has that got direct connection to Daily Mail, hurrah for the black shirts headline? So when did he? So you said he joined in 32.
He joined in 32.
He was made
director of propaganda in 34.
right.
And in that same year, the Daily Mail would have published the headline.
Yeah. At that time, for
Well, yeah.
for those of people who don't know, the Daily Mail in England published a front cover supporting British Union of Fascists, basically.
Yeah, I mean would have been the then Viscount Rothermere, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But he was a supporter of Hitler and Mussolini anyway.
I don't care what anybody says. Hitler was a bad man.
So it would have been naturally, and as they continue to be today.
Well, yeah.
You know,
Okay, so
the Daily
it
Mail
could
is
have
not
been
a nice.
completely unconnected. They were just up for that headline anyway.
It was they were pro-fascist, so they just got excited that the fascists were. Bearing in mind that there was going to be upcoming elections, and the media throws their support behind the party they favour at the best of times.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were just saying, "Oh, the fascists are on the rise," and Daily Mail is big up for it.
Daily Mail euphemistically called a newspaper.
Well, yeah, it's made of paper. But the meteoric rise of the British Union of Fascists was not to be. They tried to stand in the 1937 elections and
Got nowhere. Yeah.
And then Mosley downsized the party and sacked Joyce, so he was out. So
Right,
it only
okay.
lasted five years in the party, let's call it.
Do we know why he was sacked? Did he
Because they did
just
badly,
fell out of favour, I suppose? Or...
because they didn't do well.
Yeah, well, he downsized. He sacked lots of people. Just Joyce was among them. I don't know, but I would assume that after failing at the election, the association with National
True,
Socialism
yeah,
probably
yeah.
wasn't great, because they would have dropped that then. From
You
there.
only bring leaders in that can help you win.
Yeah,
If you
exactly.
stop winning, get rid of them.
And Oswald Mosley was very much like that. He was a fascist in every possible way. So
Okay.
yeah, if they're not winning, then they're out.
So was Bill now like freelance kind of?
Yeah. So in 1939, it looks like war's coming, and then Britain has regulations in place about internment, which Britain and America did this, and I think abroad as well, and it's quite horrible. But basically, anyone who might even remotely possibly be on the wrong side in the war effort is put into a concentration camp.
Right.
That's
okay.
what internment is. So Japanese Americans would have been interned during the war. Likewise, he thought that because of his political standpoint, he would be considered a threat and put into an internment camp. So he and his wife fled that to Germany, and he became naturalised as a German citizen in 1940.
Who at that time emigrated into Germany?
Well, yeah, not many. I mean,
I don't know. I mean,
there would have been British and American citizens who have German ancestry, German parentage, who would have gone home to the fatherland.
Okay.
You know, who didn't face persecution.
Right. Yes.
Aryan
of course.
types.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, political
And political
affiliates.
leanings, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's rare you hear that, though. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
So
We
during
got
the start of the war, we decided to up sticks and move to Germany. You know. Do you know what I mean?
well, there was a British. I don't know if it was a division, but there was an SS brigade of British people, for example.
Wow.
There was
I'm
an
sure there
SS
was, yeah.
brigade of Muslims at one point. It shows how desperate they were getting in the war, because it was, you know, contrary to their thinking, the ideology. But there was a British, regiment, division, brigade, something, a group
Yeah.
in the SS. Now, bearing in mind that the SS was originally the creme de la creme of Aryan supremacy, according to their minds. So when you say, well, it was just make up divisions of other subsets of society or sub-nationalities or whatever. So, yeah, people went in as well as fled.
So they moved there.
As far as William Joyce was concerned, he was fleeing Britain for the protection of Germany.
Okay. And he was well known.
He was he was almost immediately recruited by the German broadcasting services because he obviously spoke English, so he could broadcast in their English-speaking channels. And in 1940, at the height of his listenership in the UK, he had 6 million regular listeners, and probably 3 times that who listened occasionally. So,
I would say most people have never heard of the name William Joyce, but some people, or a hell of a lot more people, will have heard of, for obvious reasons, because it's a silly name.
Yeah.
Have we got to the nickname yet?
Yes, so he was called Lord Haw-Haw, and the name is predominantly because he sounded a bit posh. You know, he had haughty. He had a university education in Britain.
It's H-A-W though, isn't it?
It's H-A-W, Haw-Haw, as in sort of as a laugh, horsey laugh. Haw-Haw.
Right, fine, yeah.
Children can be so cruel.
Indeed.
Why was he made a lord? I mean, I know he wasn't made a lord, but
well, because it
why
added
was
to that
silliness.
Snorty.
Right.
He added to the snooty,
Snooty.
haughty.
Was Lord Snooty around? He was probably at then.
Yeah, probably.
I know it
That's
doesn't
a
rhyme.
cartoon
but-
character, though.
Well,
Not
yes.
a real. He wasn't a real lord
No, I'm
either.
aware.
Okay. Neither was Alfred Lord Tennyson. His name was Lord.
His name wasn't Lord.
His name was Lord.
Oh, his name
He
was
wasn't a lord.
No, yeah, I know. Yeah. And John Lord. No.
John Lord.
John Lord.
Lord
Who's
Rockingham's
John
11.
Lord? He's the
He was the
drummer from
yeah.
Deep Purple.
He's not a lord either.
Oh, isn't he not?
No.
Anyway, where were we?
It's done in the States, isn't there a Justice?
There is a Justice, yeah. It's not a Lord Justice.
No.
So it's a
Okay.
nickname just to make him sound
It's a nickname,
silly.
yeah. In fact, it wasn't even his nickname. He inherited it from someone else.
I don't think you don't inherit nicknames from someone else, do you?
Well, the nickname seems to have been coined in 1939, but there was a chap that he replaced who called Wolf Butler, I believe is correct, and he was also called Lord Haw-Haw by Britain. And then there's a whole other bunch of candidates who may have at one time or another carried that nickname as well. But he's the one it stuck with because he was the most popular, and he, the most
became infamous.
It became and
while he had it.
Exactly. And of course, that from the time he had it and on, we were at full out war. So that was the one.
So, what was he doing to gain that name? So he's broadcasting in English propaganda, obviously.
Yes.
Is that it? Is that literally the reason?
Yeah, that is it.
And it's to basically try and make him a figure of fun.
Yes.
Is it?
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so. There were parodies of him as well, where people would do radio broadcasts, in the style of his broadcast, but parodies of him.
What did was he heavily Irish accented? Or?
No. It's very, very clear.
By then,
yeah. I mean, BBC diction, proper Queen's English.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and he would basically he would go on and he would give the war from the Nazi perspective.
Other side, yeah.
So, and he would always open the broadcasts with the words "Germany calling," which he would repeat, and then he would make statements, broad sweeping generalizations, typically punctuated with specific details that may or may not have been true. But it was propaganda, so it was literally about, the British armies are failing on this front and that front, and the glorious German army has marched into Denmark, and everyone has laid down their arms and, welcomed them.
Just when I think you've said the stupidest thing ever, you keep talking.
Etc. Nonsense like that.
So it's a morale-based.
Yeah, it's
thing,
targeted
isn't it?
at the British morale to basically. Yeah.
All he's doing is reading out stuff, but it's. Well, no, sorry, I meant morale in the sense of the press thought of a silly name to morale for British troops to just make him look like a fool.
Well, he was broadcasting this propaganda to Britain. Britain was hearing it, and obviously that would have arguably defeated British morale.
Who's this bloke?
So how do you fight back?
Yeah.
Well, you take the mickey out of it. You satirise it and you mock it.
I suppose radio's something that's a little harder to block, isn't it? It's not like nowadays, if someone's got a podcast you don't like, you can just ban the hosting IP.
Don't listen. Listen to this.
But radio, you can just, if the signals will reach there, then you can listen.
Well, exactly, yeah. So he was broadcasting all of this anti-British and pro-Nazi, and he was not only broadcasting it and reading it, as you said, but he wrote it as well. So he was the propagandist, he was the writer.
Only in English?
Only in English, yeah. So in April 1945, we get now to the end of the war. It's his final broadcast. He's clearly drunk. He's rambling. It's the same old nonsense.
The spirit of unity and the spirit of strength.
But, he knows he's on his way out. So he knows it's his last broadcast. He signs off, farewell. And then within a month, he's arrested by, as I said, the British forces moving into Flensburg. So the German government, inverted commas, has fled now to Flensburg. Berlin is under Soviet occupation. So the government's in Flensburg. British troops move into Flensburg. He's there. He's arrested.
Well, yeah, they were. I think 2 weeks before that, they started hiding out in a cottage with a widow. And I think she was just an old widow. She probably didn't even know who they were. So she'd just been hiding there conveniently. And his wife was taking the car, and he decided to take a shortcut through the woods. We're probably going to meet the other side of the woods or something, I don't know. And as he's coming out the other side of the woods, he sees 2 British servicemen at the side of the road looking like they're collecting wood. So he picks up a couple of pieces and says, in French, here's a couple more pieces. And the servicemen just look at him. So he repeats the phrase again in English.
Yeah.
And one of the guys who his name deliciously is Bertie Licorice. So
good. No relation.
Aren't you Lord Haw-Haw? Just recognise the voice. These guys.
Oh, you recognise the voice.
Yeah, these guys were from T-Force, which was a specific group of army operatives set out to collect people like him.
Yeah.
And he just happened to stumble on them collecting wood. He said, "Aren't you Lord Haw-Haw?" And he then reaches into his pocket to get out his fake ID, which he's got, which has some, rubbish fake ID.
Yeah.
And the other guy that's with him thinks that he's reaching in for a weapon.
For his gun, yeah.
So the other guy then pulls out his weapon and shoots him. But the best bit about this is that the guy that shoots, unfortunately, it wasn't Bertie Licorice who shot him. It was
Bertie
the guy
Bassett
that was with him, yeah, who was actually a German Jew.
Perfect.
Who shot him with a Nazi gun he'd stolen.
Sweet.
Wow. In the ass.
In the ass. Popped a cap in his ass. Right in the butt.
I just love that.
occasioning 4 wounds.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was that in and out of
I
both
mean, I'm
cheeks?
assuming straight through both buttocks.
In and out of one cheek and through in and out the other cheek.
I mean, that's a cartoon wound if ever there
Yeah.
was one. But I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. You could not have planned
No.
that kind
No.
of thing.
And
Yeah.
that kind of the language slip up kind of bit
Yeah.
is just it comes out of a British Ealing comedy.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautifully poetic. He's recognised because of this voice he's been taunting Britain with. A German Jew shoots him in the ass, straight through both buttocks. I mean, it's literally from a comic book. It's fantastic. And it couldn't have happened to a nicer bloke.
No, I mean that in itself really was more a greater justice than his final hanging, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the final humiliation.
He was then captured, was he?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so he's under arrest in May. In September, on the 17th, his trial begins, and he's being tried for 3 counts of high treason. So, for the period of the war, and while the war was going on, he treacherously adhered to the king's enemies by broadcasting propaganda. The second one, he's failing to adhere to his allegiance to the crown by purporting to become a naturalised citizen of Germany. So, for feigning foreign citizenship.
I'll say that essentially makes emigration illegal.
Yeah. in time of war, presumably.
Right.
And then the third one is from the outbreak of war to the time he became naturalised. It's basically the same as the first charge, but specifically because he's under the protection of the crown. Okay? So, obviously, nationality is the key to this. He was born an American.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's raised in
Ireland.
He's raised in
Ethnically
Ireland.
Irish.
Ethnically Irish. He's raised in Ireland. And then he is naturalised as a German citizen. So, is there jurisdiction? Can he commit
For
treason
Britain.
against Britain if he's a German citizen? Question 1. And if he's born American?
But what was his citizenship at the point which he committed treason?
Well, he held a British passport.
Good enough.
For the crown, yes, it was.
Okay.
That was enough.
This is held a British passport, having moved to Wimbledon, aged teenager.
Yes. So the first 2 charges he was acquitted of. The third charge is the one that everyone hinged their prospects on.
Yep.
And that one was because it was worded in such that it was from the outbreak of war until he became a German citizen.
Which wasn't a very long period of time.
No, I mean, it was a few months.
Yep.
During that time, he was still a holder of a British passport.
And he was doing high treasonable acts.
He was doing propaganda before he became a German
So as soon as he
citizen.
became German citizen, it kind of... Obviously, it doesn't become all right, but he was German, so that's what they did.
Any activity after that date
But
would be
it's
considered support for his country.
Sure, yeah. So it's whatever it was, 2-3 months of being British and doing it.
Yeah.
Was good enough.
Yeah. But what's interesting about that is the argument is that having a British passport, the argument for the prosecution was that as a holder of a British passport, he is afforded crown protection overseas. Yeah.
Oh, right.
And therefore owes his allegiance to the crown.
So that's good for the prosecution.
Good for the prosecution. However, he wasn't British. He was born American. And the only reason he had a British passport was because he misstated his nationality when he applied for a passport. So technically, his crime was misstating his information on a passport application, which would have been a fine.
Oh, okay. But they got around
Technically.
it, obviously.
Yeah.
Knowing what ultimately happened.
Why
is it a bad thing that... Sorry, why is it not as seemingly bad that he did all those acts and for a period of time during the war he was technically American? Meaning...
Because you can't commit treason against your own country if your own country is not the one who against you committed treason.
Because he
didn't commit treason against Britain because he wasn't British. He could have committed treason against America.
Right.
But he didn't. He was slagging off Britain.
I was treating it as a kind of black and white, them and us kind of thing. But obviously, I'm aware America weren't involved at the time.
Because he was broadcasting anti-British, pro-Nazi propaganda to Britain.
Yes.
And
what's that got to
Britain
do with
charged him with treason.
Yeah.
Basically, because he had a British passport, but he had a British passport under basically arguably false pretenses because he said he was British and he wasn't.
Yeah. As a German or an American, that's perfectly perfectly okay.
I mean, yeah, in legal terms, yeah. But the fact of the matter is, they wanted him.
Yeah, of course.
They bloody wanted to get him.
Is this an Al Capone kind of
this
thing?
This is the passport loophole is the tax issue in the Capone case, as you rightly say. So basically they said, okay, you're found guilty of treason under the terms of this because you've been afforded crown protection, by whatever means it's been afforded to you, and you've basically owe allegiance and you've counted,
regardless if
whether you fraudulently obtained it,
you still
you were still given
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's how they did it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So on this tenuous pretext, he was found guilty.
Right.
The law has spoken.
He appealed. He appealed to the Court of Appeal, who upheld the sentence, and then he appealed to the House of Lords, and they upheld it as well.
He was a lord, though.
No.
Hang on.
No.
Forgetting. Surely they were mates.
And as a mandatory sentence for treason was hanging.
Yes.
To the gallows he goes. So basically, I mean, I don't think there can be any doubt in our minds around this table that he was always going to hang. That was going to happen regardless. Because
because they were just determined.
Because in the time of war, you go on the radio and slag off Britain, and then Britain catches you. You're going down. Yeah. I say Britain. I mean any country. Any country will do.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, let's face it. If he'd been an Englishman. If he'd been a German in England slagging off Germany, there's no doubt in my mind that he would have had a far worse punishment than a simple hanging.
He got off easy.
We could use another example from a previous episode when a Hungarian citizen slags off Hungary. A Bulgarian citizen slags off Bulgaria in the UK.
Yeah.
Bulgaria is going to send somebody to get him.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't even wait.
Yeah.
They didn't even wait. Well, let's go. We didn't parachute anyone into Germany to get him. So on the 3rd of January in 1946, William Joyce is hanged at Wandsworth Prison, age 39. And in a particularly gruesome detail, the scar that we've made a great point of mentioning, when he hanged, he dropped through the hatch and was yanked by the rope with such ferocity that it opened the wound from ear to mouth.
Ouch.
So that would have looked like the most gruesome
like a Muppet.
ventriloquist dummy you've ever seen. Yeah. He had been buried in the grounds of Wandsworth.
What's the name of the hangman?
Albert Pierrepoint.
Did he do it?
Yes.
He did?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Well, did he really hang him?
It was him, yeah.
I suppose he was the
man.
He was the daddy.
He was the Mac Daddy of the noose.
Of hanging.
Which is the name of my debut album.
He wasn't that busy, was he?
Well, no, that's all he had to do, realistically. Although the next day he had another job. He had to hang someone else the following day, who was the last man in Britain to be hanged for treachery. Was hanged the next day.
So
William Joyce was the last man hanged in Britain for treason.
Oh, we're not going on hanging. We're going on the reasons for hanging on. I was about to say, so the next day he was out of work, but
after that it was all murder.
Hanging carried on. Yeah. Sorry, it's just the treason and
treachery.
After
that, his job was murder.
Yeah, fine. Yeah.
Yes. So last man hanged for treason in Britain was William Joyce on the 3rd of January, and on the 4th of January, Theodore Schurch was hanged for treachery. And they were the last people for any reason other than murder. Everyone after that was hanged for murder. He was reinterred in Galway in 1976. So there's not a great deal in modern popular culture surrounding the character Lord Haw-Haw, but at the time there was lots. There was a parody broadcast just after the war, and there were Pathé broadcasts parodying the character as well. There was a Lord Haw-Haw representing the Nasty Party broadcast, and basically it was very non-subtle satire of the character, but it was all contemporaneous at the time. What I can tell you is that the idea of regimes having national propaganda characters broadcasting to the opposition has continued. So at the time, as well as Lord Haw-Haw broadcasting from Germany to Britain, in America you had Axis Sally. She was pro-German, broadcasting to America. She was arrested and hanged at the end of the war.
Sally. Right.
Axis Sally. On the other side of the Pacific, you had Tokyo Rose, who...
Where were they from?
Well, she was broadcasting to American troops in the Pacific Theatre from Tokyo, on behalf of Japanese. And right up until Vietnam, during the Vietnam War, you had Hanoi Hannah, who was broadcasting from North Vietnam to American troops fighting for the South. That's all for this time. If you want to know more about what we've discussed over the course of the episode, just Google it or something. You can see daily true crime updates on our Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, or you can support the show with a PayPal donation. And links to all of those are on our website, truecrimediary.co.uk. Join us next time when we will be similarly discussing and digressing on another event in true crime history. Until then, my thanks to Jed and Rue. My name's Mark, and we'll see you on the next date in our True Crime Diary.
William Joyce has been executed, and to millions of Britons that must have seemed his obvious destiny once he'd been captured. And doubtless few, if any, among the crowd had not at some time or other listened to and detested the voice of Lord Haw-Haw broadcasting to Britain from Germany. A notice is posted proclaiming that Joyce has been hanged. That is the only end that traitors to the country can expect.